Hi, and welcome to the Higher Education Access Corner. I'm your host, Tiffanie, and today we're bringing you another Career Spotlight. And with the Career Spotlight segments, we have conversations with new and seasoned professionals who are sharing their insight and their experience in their respective careers. So today I am super excited because we have our very own Jim Steeley, who's the president and CEO of PHEAA. So welcome, Mr. Steeley, to the podcast.
Thank you. It's nice to be back.
Absolutely. And for those who don't know, Mr. Steeley is also a certified public accountant. And so our career spotlight is actually going to be on accounting today. So he's going to give us some good information, share some experiences, and hopefully for any students or anyone else, even adults who are looking into going into accounting, it'll help you make a decision on whether you want to pursue the exploration piece a little further. So Jim, for our listeners who may not know exactly what accounting is, what does an accountant do? Can you explain some of those key duties to us?
So there's a wide range of what accountants do, and I think a lot of cases where reality differs greatly from perception. Accounting can be anything from bookkeeping, like sort of doing the back office bookkeeping of any type of business or organization, to taxes, which is what almost everyone thinks of when they hear accountant. And, probably one of the biggest areas that people often do not think of is financial reporting, which is basically pulling together the financial results and the books and records of a business or not-for-profit or governmental organization to report to the board or owners or shareholders. So it can be a wide range of things. I think often students have the perception that, they're just going to be like, doing taxes their whole career. And the reality is that's probably it's an important part of the profession, but it's a small part of the profession. There's a lot of other things that accountants do as well.
And then for those who don't know, so we have an accountant, and we have certified public accountant. So what's the benefit of becoming a CPA?
So being a certified public accountant is basically, it's a professional designation. You have to meet certain educational and experience requirements to get the initial license, which is issued at the state level. Each state has slightly different criteria. And then in addition to that, to keep your license, you have to meet continuing education requirements. So here in Pennsylvania, to keep my license active every 2 years, I need to get 80 continuing education hours in a combination of accounting, tax, general topics, and ethics. And so what the designation of a CPA really does is it sends to the public it's a message that, okay, this person has the right background, they've had the right work experiences, and they've taken steps to keep themselves up to date in the profession. So it's really, I would say, education and experience is sort of the hallmark. There's a lot of people that have very successful careers in accounting without being a CPA. My dad being one of them. He was a controller of a product group of the old AMP Incorporated here in Harrisburg. And, he wasn't a CPA and did very well in his career without that designation. So it all depends on what you want to do.
Okay. So you kind of are leading me into almost my next question. I was going to ask, what made you want to become an accountant? Were you influenced by anyone? You mentioned your dad was an accountant. So
yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I would say I was probably most influenced by my dad and my middle sister. So my dad was, I think many kids when they grow up, they sort of look up to their dad and, want to be like their dad when they grow up. And, maybe I was a boring kid, but I was very interested in what my dad did. He was a controller of a couple $100 million business unit at the old AMP Incorporated. Business unit back in the 90s provided like the component connector parts to the Pentium chips, which were like all the rage in the 90s. So it actually is very interesting what his product group made and what he did for a living trying to push that business forward. So I always thought, sort of piqued my interest to begin with. And then I'm the youngest of 3 kids. So my middle sister, who's probably about 6 years older than me, graduated from college in 1993 as an accounting major. And one of the things, I saw, and I think this is important, sort of what we do at PHEAA, and maybe some of the messaging you provide to students is, while we want people to pursue education, you do want to pursue education and be able to come out of the other side with a degree that enables you to get a better job and adds value. Mm-hmm. So going back to the early 90s, 92, 93 was sort of a period of, we had a recession in 90, 91 in the country, and then 92, 93 was known as like a jobless recovery. The economy was getting better, but there still aren't a lot of jobs out there. And one of the things that was interesting when my sister graduated from college as an accounting major, she had no issue getting a job. She had a job before she graduated.
Nice.
The majority of her friends did not. So you had people that graduated with degrees in business that, went and worked in retail, which they could have done out of high school. Mm-hmm. So sort of one of the lessons for me in that is that, okay, there's many things that sound exciting, like I loved history, would have been fun to be a history major. Everyone, I think when they major in business, they want to pick a concentration. It's like, oh, well, marketing's fun. Mm-hmm. Those are the people my sister graduated with that really struggled post-college to find a job, mm-hmm. where like a skill like accounting was very concrete. A lot of the accounting firms, fast forward to when I finished college in the late 90s, the economy was booming. Mm-hmm. And I had 4 job offers before Thanksgiving of my senior year.
Nice.
So
you had options.
I had options. So, it's sort of making sure you can come out of college and get a value for not just the money you're spending going to college, but also the time you're putting into that experience. So really my dad and sister are the ones that influenced my decision to go to school for accounting and major.
Nice. How much did you actually see of what they were able to do? And I don't know if your dad ever brought anything home, but like you're thinking about how do you prepare for that journey? Was it because you had an inside track where you can kind of say, well, you know what, I know I need to focus on this or I need to focus on that, but what was your journey like in order to get you to the accounting?
So, to a degree, my dad would talk a little bit about what he did day in and day out, usually more at the dinner table, usually more to my mom. So just sort of observing things growing up. When AMP finally sold in the 90s, it was interesting to sort of have a front seat to the sales process and sort of the roller coaster up and down of that. I would say that actually in particular was beneficial because probably 20 years later in my job prior to PHEAA, I was a corporate controller of a regional bank headquartered in the Lancaster area, the old Susquehanna Bank shares. And we went through a process and we ultimately sold to BB&T, which is now Truist. Mm-hmm. And so, sort of I was a college student when my dad's company sold, and then, fast forward 20 years, it was interesting to go. I went through the same experience myself. So I would say just observing was very interesting over the years.
Did you have an opportunity when you were in high school to talk to, the counselors where they say, make sure you focus on certain math classes or math courses, or you need to have this particular skill set before you head into college and things like that?
So I'd say that actually in high school, my high school had an accounting class, which I took. I mean, it was more like the basics of bookkeeping, but it at least was like a good sort of foundational level. I would say it probably got me, the first month of my first accounting class in college probably covered what that class did, but it at least helped sort of helped, I'd say, get off on the right foot in college. But I think more than anything, it was sort of a good litmus test, like, do I like this or not like this? Right. So I would say that sort of was the value of that class, in my opinion, in high school.
And I think that's a good point, because I talk to a lot of students and they'll say, I want to do this, but they have no knowledge of it. They haven't taken a course in it. They've not even sat down yet to have a conversation with someone who's in that profession. So for that student who's listening and they're thinking they might want to be an accountant, can you tell us what's a day in the life of an accountant like for someone who's just entering that particular career?
So it's all over the spectrum, but what I'm going to do is focus on, I'll say, the traditional accounting path, which is graduate from college and you go to work for a public accounting firm. Mm-hmm. So the public accounting firms vary in size. There's some very small local ones. They do tax, they do consulting. The biggest thing that a lot of them do is financial statement audits, which is basically validates that the financial statements that a company puts out to its investors are accurate. So when I came out of school, I started at PricewaterhouseCoopers, or PwC, and one of the really great experiences, I would say I spent 9 years at PwC. Okay. And I was working. It was a job, but I would say that was probably one of the best educational experiences I had in my life. The firm had a lot of value and placed a lot of value in continuing education. The first 2 weeks I worked there, I spent sort of immersed in training. Mm-hmm. And then you at least spent 1 to 2 weeks a year being sent somewhere to continually learn and improve your skills. You learned from the people you worked for. But in terms of the day in and day out, what I really liked, and this is sort of anecdotal, but it's, I think, important for young people to form relationships. The neat thing with a public accounting is they hire a lot of people out of college all at once. Mm-hmm. So you start in what's known as a start class. So you're starting with a whole group of people your age that are all brand new, and you build those relationships. I was in a small office here in Harrisburg. My start class was, I think we were 8. After the first year, we were down to 6. The 6 of us became pretty close over the years, and it became my sort of work group, but also my social group. And over the years, I think about the weddings you go to, the people you stay in touch with. A lot of the people I've stayed in touch with X number of years later are the people I worked with very early in my career. So it's, I'd say, very rewarding just to sort of be in that learning environment with people, that are young, energetic.
And going through some of the same things that you are in life, in your careers. So and this doesn't have to be with you or even just your colleagues at the time, but what are some expected challenges that someone who's first entering this field could possibly expect? Doesn't mean they will, but you've seen happen.
One of the things that I have seen a couple times over the years, and eventually as I rose through the ranks at PwC, I did recruiting. And I'll just give an example of people I've saw working with. I mentioned I started with 8 people. Some of the people that sort of fizzled and didn't make it through that first year actually were probably a lot smarter grade-wise than some of the people that made it through that first year. But they were very, they weren't necessarily as flexible or willing to dive in things. And, and I'll translate that to like when I started to do recruiting for PwC and doing college recruiting and interviewing, the students I always look for were the people that, I would have rather hired someone with a slightly lower GPA if they played sports, if they worked while going to school, if they, were balancing a family commitment, like something that showed that the individual could balance a number of things. Mm-hmm. Because we all know when we start working, life also happens. Right. So like the ability to balance as a professional and juggle things, whether, it's kids' activities, the demands of work, that's something I looked for when I interviewed students. It's like, okay, if they played a sport, if they worked, and they got good grades or even okay grades, mm-hmm. that person was probably more likely to do well than maybe someone that got a 4.0 but just sat in the library 24/7.
I'm glad you stated that, because we talk to students all the time, and we sometimes stress the importance of, being involved and getting involved in other activities. It can teach you so many different things, and that's a skill set that life happens. So you have to have that skill set to be able to multitask, juggle, and still get the job done. So I'm glad you said that. Hopefully our students and families and even educators are listening, and they'll continue that part of the message as well, because I think that's a really good point. Anything that really surprised you about being an accountant? You knew your dad went through it, your sister, but then you were in the trenches, and anything that just threw you off?
Well, I'll say what surprised me is, my dad's path was very much, I'll say, the corporate side, sort of the profitability of a part of a company, pushing that company forward, supporting decision making, if you will. So I always had the thought that that's where the part I would end up in, and eventually I did. But then, my sister also went that route right out of college. She didn't go the public accounting route. Both my sister, as well as my professors and my dad, encouraged me to go the public accounting route. I think my sister, like hindsight, would have probably wished she would have. So I did, but I had this perception that, going the public accounting route is a good way to get the experience needed, because you need audit hours to get your CPA credential. So that was the main reason that people pushed me to do that. And you needed, at the time, 2 years of work experience. So I thought, okay, I'll go to PwC, work there 2 years, and then I'll move on. And what surprised me is I didn't move on, because what I found is I liked it. I constantly was learning something new. There was a natural progression up. I constantly was learning something new. So it was, it really kept me engaged. I never expected to be there 9 years, but because I kept doing new things, whether having new clients,
you stayed engaged,
new experiences, I found I really like this. I was continually learning.
That's a good thing.
So I'd
like
say that probably was the biggest surprise is, I came out of school with the mindset that, okay, public accounting was just like a quick stopping place to then go do what I wanted to do. And I found that I actually really liked it. And
that's nice.
Ended up staying 9 years.
Some of your most memorable moments throughout that time. Can you think of anything?
Financial crisis. I audited financial institutions and had an odd combination of a couple of financial institutions for my December year ends and a couple of colleges for my June 30th year ends. And they all were impacted in one way or another by the financial crisis. A number of the colleges I audited, their debt became frozen in the secondary markets. Financial institutions, didn't struggle to survive, but they got stuck in some difficult investments because of some of the liquidity freezes. All of my clients worked their way quite well through the through the ups and downs, but it was very much very much an emotional roller coaster, because every day it was like, what is the next shoe that's going to drop at one of my clients? And it would be that random phone call at, I remember I was sitting out at a college and one of my banking clients, the CFO, I see his name pop up on my cell phone at 7 at night in September. And I'm thinking, he's usually not at work now. This can't be good. And it was like, okay, buried in their investment portfolio through something that was packaged together and sold to them. They had exposure to someone that failed that in September of 2008. And it was a manageable exposure, but it was like you never were quite sure what shoe was going to drop, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. So, in addition to the skill set that's required with an accountant, for someone who's coming into this, what are 2 or 3 soft skills that every CPA or professional should acquire? Because you never know what's coming your way, the manner in which it's coming. And so you need more than just the ability to do just the accounting work.
Yeah, I mean, I think being able to be flexible and pivot, we talked about juggling things. And then the other big skill set that I'd say doesn't just serve accounting well, I think it serves, what you do well, serves almost any profession well, is the ability to be approachable, just sort of down to earth, relatable, ability to talk to people, because as you think about, like, when I was in public accounting a couple of years out of school, I could be meeting with anywhere from a CFO of a company to out observing a company in a manufacturing facility doing their physical inventory on New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, where they have people off the assembly line doing the inventory. So you think about the ability to work with anyone from, someone on an assembly line or an accounting clerk to a CFO a couple of years out of school, takes a certain amount of flexibility and relatability to be able to work with two very different types of individuals in the workplace. So, I'm sure you encounter some of that. You probably you probably are dealing with families that have a lot of financial sophistication, and so you're helping them through the college planning process.
And then some first gen.
Yeah, that are like, totally, please help. What do I do now?
Know what to do. Right.
Yeah, so it's being able to be flexible and relatable that I think really make all the difference for accounting, but I think what you do in general, yeah.
So here's a question that I do have, because I get this a lot, especially doing assessments with students. Sometimes they'll do all the numbers and they'll say, I'm not a people person, I'm an introvert, I love numbers, but I don't want to have to ever deal with anyone. And a lot of times these assessments will take them to something like accounting, because they're saying you never ever have to work with them. The accountants are the ones who are just totally the introverts. They don't like to talk to folks. They don't want to show their personality. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I'd say it depends.
Okay.
I mean, there's certainly a role for introverts in accounting. Public accounting does require a little bit more extrovert type of work. It really requires a blend, I'd say, in public accounting, because you do have to go do a lot of work, but you also have to talk to people. If you're the person sort of compiling a tax return or compiling a set of financial statements, it can, being an introvert and be able to sit and focus on doing the task at hand, you can be very well served with that skill set. So it's really...
It depends.
It depends, yes.
I get that. And so for our listeners, I ask that question because it comes up a lot just in my day-to-day when I interact with students. But I've also met some who really want to be an accountant or want to be in a certain profession. Maybe it's not accounting, and they're saying, but I'm an introvert and I don't know how to bounce out. And I actually share with them, so am I. However, I pop out. And so I know how to maneuver, and most folks will say, you're not an introvert. Actually, I am. When I go home at the end of the day, I'm exhausted. The rest of that doesn't continue on, the outgoing piece doesn't continue on. But I challenge students because it does take a blend. So I challenge students to say, even if you're an introvert, give it a try. If you're an extrovert, give it a try, just to see what can happen, because these are skill sets that you can learn how to maneuver and interact, and talk to other people and communicate with them and figure out what they need and be adaptable and flexible. So I'm glad you said it depends, because I do hear that. Moving to the next part. So if you're looking back over the entire span of your career, what advice, if any, would you give to your younger self?
Probably to be a little bit more willing to step out of my comfort zone. I was probably a little bit too introverted when I first started early in my career. That was my personality. Like you, so I have a job now that requires a blend, but it is exhausting. But, it's also rewarding at times. And very early in my career, I was almost very, too shy, too unwilling to if there was an opportunity to go work on this project or that project, I wouldn't necessarily be the person that would raise their hand, because I'd be like, I'd think of the things to worry about as opposed to the potential benefits. So I'd say, with hindsight, if I could go back and tell my younger self to be more willing to step out of my comfort zone, that, worry less, step out of the comfort zone, and things will work out. Something I learned over time, but
your younger self could have really used that.
Yes, yeah.
I get that. And I think that applies to a lot of us. If we, look back, just do it anyway. If you're afraid, just do it. If you're, not
Yeah,
sure,
I like that. Just do it anyway.
Do it anyway. Yeah, just go with the flow. So what experience or skill set best prepared you to transition into your current role as president and CEO of PHEAA?
So I'd say a couple of things. Probably one of the things, I've spent a lot of my career while in accounting working with financial institutions, either auditing them or working for them. And at its heart, PHEAA is largely driven, we're a state entity, but we're a state finance entity. Mm-hmm. So, really being able to understand the financial mechanisms, how the capital markets work. And capital markets sometimes can be, viewed as a bad word depending on where people stand. But what I think is really neat with the capital markets and with some of the things we do, like with our PA4 loan program, we're able to use tax-exempt funding, issue debt at a relatively low rate because investors don't pay federal income tax, and if they live in Pennsylvania, they don't pay Pennsylvania income tax on the interest they own or that they earn. So we're able to issue debt at a relatively low rate and then pass those rates on to students. And, it varies by year of origination, but we calculate over the life of a loan, compared to other private sector alternatives, we save a typical family a couple $1,000s on their loan just by being able to issue at lower rates. Mm-hmm. So really what I'd say is one of the things that's benefited me is that experience in the capital markets, in the private sector, doing debt offerings, doing equity offerings, and then being able to bring that to PHEAA and create a program that basically makes the capital markets work to benefit middle-class Pennsylvanians. And that to me is a really, it's something I'm very proud of. It's something that I enjoy doing, and I think it's something that's making a difference. The other thing that's, I'd say, really benefited me, and I'd say this is beyond necessarily accounting, it would be, and as students look maybe for their first job as to where they want to work, one of the things to look for is a company that invests in you and grows in you. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons I said I stayed at PwC so long. If you think about the journey that PwC took me on, and at times probably drug me on, I took a sort of shy, somewhat introverted kid out of college, and when I left the firm, I was a senior manager. And part of that, they invested a lot in, I'll say, today the term would be EQ. I think back then it was more soft skills, teaching you how to lead teams, teaching you how to interact with clients. Mm-hmm. The investment that PwC put into me over those 9 years continued to serve me in all my other roles since then. And certainly, if you look at leading an organization like PHEAA, makes a difference in terms of the ability to lead and motivate close to 1,000 individuals.
Quite a task that we have. And while we're at it, before I finish up, you also mentioned PA Forward. So I want to make a shameless plug because it's part of what I do as an Access partner. So, and it's also the time of the year where students are going back. So we do have, I think, a really solid student loan program called PA Forward. And if anyone out there needs more information on it, go to PHEAA.org/PA Forward. So you'll get a lot of great information. Again, I always say student loans are your last resort because you always want to exhaust those free options first. However, it is a strong and viable product that we do offer.
And we also want, generally speaking, we want people not just to take all the gift and grant aid, want them to take the federal Stafford or direct loan first.
Right.
But then look at, that caps out at relatively low levels. It's like, what, 5,000-6,000 a year, I believe?
Right, 5,500 your first year. Yeah, and then it slightly increases each year. So there we go. Free money first, federal student loans as that next option, or any other free opportunities that you have. I always push scholarships as well.
Yes, scholarship. There's a lot of scholarship opportunities out there.
Absolutely.
Maybe you should plug your scholarship webinar coming
Searching for Scholarships. We have a Searching for Scholarships webinar that we'll be doing. Go to PHEAA.org/virtual and you'll get all of the details on that as well. I will be co-presenting with Ron Felder, our other Access partner. So lots of good information, lots of good resources for that. Jim, before we wrap up, so good information. Any advice for someone who aspires just to one day lead an organization or go into accounting? Last bits of knowledge that you might want to share.
Just be flexible and open to what comes your way. I mean, I think a lot of people, younger people, would like to have everything planned out. When I was young, I certainly would have. Mm-hmm. But your career just sort of evolves. And you think about, I did talk about my dad early on. If left to my own devices, I would have gone to work for a manufacturing company. Well, unbeknownst to me, someone probably sitting down in Philadelphia, they're doing this schedule of first-year associates in Harrisburg. It's like, got put on a bank, got put on an insurance company, got put on a college. Mm-hmm. PHEAA is sort of a blend of a college and a bank in a way. Yeah. So it's half of what happens in your career is just dumb luck, just pure chance. It's really what you do with that chance that drives how you do. I'd like to say there's some magic out there, but a lot of it is really chance.
Well, there you have it. Thank you so much for being on the podcast again and sharing a different side of you that many of our listeners don't often get a chance to see. They know you as the president and CEO of PHEAA, but many may not have known that you're a certified public accountant. So I thank you for sharing that. For any student who's listening in and you're possibly considering that, continue to look into this particular field, do what you can do. We have lots of resources available on our website. Again, for all of our listeners, we want to thank Mr. Steeley for joining us, and we'll see you soon on the next episode of the Higher Education Access Corner. See you soon.
Thank you, Tiffanie.
Absolutely.